Hope I never fail to appreciate the honor that comes with standing in a pulpit. I have wrestled a little bit with what to do today because I feel you need to know a little bit more about what brought me to this point. So I'm going to share a little bit of that. What I don't want to do, though, is make this about me. So as I am sharing with you some of the details of my journey to Christ, please be thinking about your journey along the way. There are some pencils in some of the pews, so should God actually give me something really awesome, feel free to write it down. I will not be offended if you start scribbling. It's okay. So let me start with the title of the sermon today. It is called From Selfish to Salvation to Sacrifice. And the more I worked on this over the last week, I came to realize this is actually a two-part sermon. So darn it all, y'all going to have to come back next week to hear part two. So as I shared at some point in all of the different meetings I had before I arrived here, I was raised as a Roman Catholic in a house with many children, second youngest of 11, which meant I had to fight for my food, which meant that he who spoke the loudest, yelled the loudest, got the most attention. By the time I was 9 years old, I was making most of my own meals. By the time I was 10, I was doing my laundry. By the time I was 16, I was about as independent as one living with his parents can become, pedaling my way back and forth to school, pedaling my way back and forth to the job. What I didn't realize is all of that independence was necessary because when I was 16, my father had a heart attack 250 miles from home, and my mom didn't come home for 9 months. All of a sudden, I was in charge of my youngest sister and myself in my house. Never forget this as I go through my journey, because it is true for your journey as well. God knows who you need to be in the future. And what you are going through and what you have gone through is always preparing you for what is to come. I understand how important that independence would become until I needed it. Now, I was a pretty good kid, and I'm not happy to say this, but at the age of 13, a friend convinced me to steal a bicycle. That got me in a little bit of trouble. Maybe someday you'll hear that story in detail. And I was 17. I was trying to impress Roxanne and put Mom's car in a ditch. That wasn't very impressive. Our first and only date, imagine that. But by the time I had reached the age of 18 and graduated high school, I was ready to leave home. How many can relate? So the rest of you wanted to stay at home when you were 18? I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to be asking you to raise some hands along the way, and it's just easier if you cooperate. I don't have to repeat myself, okay? So how many were ready to leave home at 18? So yeah, that's a little bit more truthful there. All right. But I was ready, so I left. I joined the United States Navy, went down to boot camp. While I was home, I was a really good kid because my mom understood what it meant to live right. And unfortunately, a lot of that came down to I learned to fear God as a kid. That God often felt like Mama's hand. How many know what I'm talking about? You know? And when I left home, Mama's hand didn't come with me to boot camp. So when boot camp was over and we were allowed to express ourselves as young people, I did a lot of expressing. Usually there was some alcohol involved in all that expressing, I'm sad to say, and that turned into a major problem. But boy, I loved the freedom of not living at home. My oldest son just moved into his first apartment with some buddies. He is so much better prepared for that than I was at 21 because he knows the Lord. Unfortunately, I knew of God, but I didn't really know God. And I don't know if you saw it because it went kind of quick, but go back one screen for me there, John. One more. Oh, okay, go to the next one. My bad. And the next one. We'll get this right, John. There it is. That's my submarine. That's the USS Silversides. It probably don't mean a whole lot to you. It meant a whole lot to me for a while. People always want to know, you go underwater, how do you stand it? Well, I stand up on a submarine the way I stand up in regular life. I just kind of straighten my legs out. Up I pop. People know, can you stand being underwater? Well, have you ever been on a road trip with Dad driving for like 16 hours and he wouldn't stop so anyone could go to the bathroom? That's what it's like to be on a submarine. Okay? It's like, are we there yet? It just doesn't matter because you're out for months at a time. But it was an interesting experience. The problem was when we would come in, Mom's hand wasn't there, and we would express all that suppressed environment, and we would express ourselves. How many heard wonderful stories about Navy sailors arriving in port? This was not a righteous way to live your life. But I did pretty well, I guess, in the Navy. Was in from 1981 to 1990. What was really nice was while I was in, next, John, if you would, I met this lovely lady, and the picture doesn't do her justice. This is what pictures look like when they're taken in 1984 and are exposed to the air for many, 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 many years. Okay? Because I'm telling you, she's a looker. And I had this fun one time. I shared a picture like this with a friend of mine, and he goes, well, I know why you married her. And I agree. She was gorgeous. Still is. But we met in 1984. In fact, May 25th. So just a few days from now, 35 years ago. We met in a crowd of 20,000 people down in Norfolk, Virginia when they were opening up the Waterside Mall. Ooh. WNOR did the laser light show across the water in 1984. This was tripping technology. But what basically happened was her roommate thought the guy I was with from the submarine was cute. No one thought about me, but he was cute. And she was her wingman, or wing woman, or whatever the right term is, and I was his wingman, and so I, of course, just naturally stepped in and filled the void. And don't you know, they lasted 3 weeks after I asked her to marry me. They were done. Too much pressure. But I married her. It was awesome. We met each other on May 25th. We were married October 9th of the same year. 4 months. And I was out to sea for 6 weeks of that 4 months. So we basically knew each other for 2.5 months. And I worked every third night on the submarine overnight. So basically take 2.5, multiply it by 2/3. We knew each other for about 7 weeks. And we were married, and here we are almost 35 years later. There you go. That's the requisite. Thank you. Appreciate that. We know every wedding has to have, food shoved in each other's faces because we all know we do that at some point later in life, but it's not a joyous thing. You don't like this dinner, huh? But yeah, that was a lovely day. That was actually, my mom insisted we get married in a church. Because remember, we eloped, didn't tell our parents, told my mom, and then hung up the phone right away. It was awesome. Apparently, my father said she used language he hadn't heard in 20 years for the next 2 hours, all directed at me. And then we spoke, and it was really lovely. But she insisted we get married in a church, so this was actually at the reception in my sister's house. And you know the things we do to please our mom, right? Because my wife's family was in Virginia, I was in Washington State, so my mom, who lived in Florida, chose Massachusetts as the location of the wedding. So the things you do to please mom. So we served 9 years, from 1984 to 1990 when I got out, so 6 years while we were in. Moved her around the country a little bit, from Norfolk to Washington State, from Washington State back to Norfolk, where we slept as a married couple on an air mattress in someone's living room for 4 months. That'll help your marriage. And then eventually moved to upstate New York. And we served there for 3.5 years. Kay finished her degree, finally, after 3 colleges. Mainly, of course, I was moving around the country the whole time, but no excuse. And so she finally got her degree, and we got out of the Navy and moved to Michigan. Now, if you're from Michigan or you know someone from Michigan, this is not a greeting. This is how you say where in Michigan you lived. We lived over here. Because, see, Michigan, the state, is shaped like a hand. So we lived over here. If people live in Detroit, they lived over here. And if they lived in upstate Michigan or the UP, they lived up here somewhere. So that's what you say when you're from Michigan. Virginia doesn't really have one like that. Doesn't work the same way. So I got my first real job. Now, how many of you have gotten a job at some point in your life? Hopefully this is a question everyone can raise your hand to, right? You want to ask one of those every time. So how many recognize this? Anyone recognize that? I put a little picture of it on the slideshow. Right? What is this? Yeah, they called it a floppy disk. Ain't real floppy, but that's what they called it, because the earlier ones were floppy. Right? But I'd been there about 6 months. How many of you, when you got your first job, worked really hard? You worked hard to impress, right? To be noticed, to do well. I worked hard. Came in early, stayed late, gave the assignment everything I had, used all of that military training to show my boss and my coworkers what it meant to work. Don't you hate people like that? So about 6 months on the job, the boss came around. They hired one of these HR consultants, and they gave me a little disk. And so I went to the computer, and I slid it in the slot. You remember the little door slides open? Remember that? Right? And a little program popped up, and this is what the program told me to do. It said, over the next 45 minutes, you're going to be asked 150 questions. That's exactly my reaction, young lady. I went, oh, man. Then they said, what these questions are going to be is they're all about you, or me in my case, and how you, or me, relate and work with the people I work with. Be honest. So I was. If they were scoundrels, I said they were scoundrels. If they were awesome, I said they were awesome. Weren't a lot of them. If they were like with it and got it, then I said they were with it and they got it. And I answered this 150 questions all about me and how I interfaced and worked with the people I worked with. I was honest, truthful, objective even, by golly. And then the program said, now take this disk and give it to everyone you work with. They're going to answer the exact same 150 questions about how you interact with them. And they are going to be honest and objective and truthful. How many of you are interested in getting that kind of feedback from your coworkers? Not a lot of hands. One person, my son, who I bribed to raise his hand. That's awesome. Right? Most of us don't really want to know what our coworkers think of us. Right? And but my report, it came back with 17 pages of information. Those computers, they can do so many amazing things. Somehow they turned these 150 questions plus all the other 150 questions, and they came back with a report. And it started this way. Mike, because they personalized the report, it was awesome. You have a very high opinion of yourself. That deserves a drink. So I felt pretty good at this point after one sentence. I thought the report knows me well. However, your peers perceive you to be a power-hungry, domineering, egotistical, task-oriented maniac. Thank you, me in 1990. Ouch. Now, the reason I share this is not obviously to elevate me and how awesome I was. But that first sentence indicates something really important because I thought I was really awesome. Why? Because I came in early, stayed late, worked harder than everybody else. It was all about getting the results and not about the people. Let me say that again. It was all about getting the results and not worrying about the people. So what I learned was nobody I worked with liked me. I didn't like that. I didn't like that at all. What I didn't know on that day was that this was what God chose to raise my awareness of who I was. What I didn't know was this is how God was getting me to gain acceptance of what He wanted me to know about me. What I didn't know that day was this was God's way of saying, Mike, I need you to wake up to what the world thinks of you and the way you behave so you can take action to become who I want you to become. That day, I didn't know any of that. That day, I just knew no one liked me, and I wasn't happy about it. I went home and cried to my wife. What would you do? Hide it from your wife for 3 days? Okay, I did that too. Because the reality was, at that stage in my life, with the exception of my wife, I did what I wanted, when I wanted, how I wanted, with little regard for other people's feelings. Let me say that again a little slower. I did what I wanted, when I wanted, how I wanted, with little regard for what other people thought. I was pretty much a jerk. But God said, Mike, I have a mission for you, and this is how I'm waking you up. Did you ever get bad news in your life? Did you ever get bad news that kind of rocked you to the core? And the question that pops up in your mind is, why is this happening to me? Wrong question. The right question is, what next do you want me to do, God? When something comes upon you, don't ask, why me? Ask, God, what do you want me to do with it? How do you want me to change who I am in order to respond to this circumstance? What is this set of circumstances in your life? What are they trying to prepare you for? Because all of us are going to have bad days. All of us are going to have times when we question our very existence. Raise your awareness. Accept the reality of your situation, and then ask God what actions you have to take to respond. It's a different mindset, to be sure. Now, 4 months later, and I don't have time to go into the details, I had an alcohol-related near-death experience. About 4 months after that 360 feedback report, which got me to go through that awareness, acceptance, and action thing all over again. And that was January 25th, 1991, and that was the day I quit drinking. Thank you. With the exception of a very bad waitress in Detroit 8 years later, I haven't had anything to drink since. By the way, never order a daiquiri when you're eating Mexican food, because you can't tell when they put alcohol in it. Several months later, I had a friend sit me down in a Denny's restaurant on a Thursday night at 11 o'clock and share Jesus with me. My first response when he shared Jesus with me was, shut up. It's exactly what I said. And being the strong, believing Christian that he was, he simply looked back at me by eye contact and said, no, you shut up. Because you need to hear this. What makes this information any different than anything else I've shared with you? And so I listened for the very first time in my life about this guy, Jesus, that they talked about in Catholic church, that when I was a kid, I never really paid much attention to. And God was working on me again. But at that time, I was aware of the message, but I wasn't prepared to accept it. And therefore, I took no action. But as time went on, God continued to work on me. And after 18 months at a non-denominational worship service at an Amway rally in Toledo, Ohio, crazy, isn't it, the way God works? At an Amway rally, I met Jesus. Isn't that nuts? Now, if you don't know what Amway is, it's a multi-level marketing company, and they do what's called personal marketing, which is people talking to people. And so eventually someone had talked to me, and then I turned around and ended up going to one of these events, and then we went back month after month after month after month. We didn't go for the God stuff, we went for the money stuff. But the whole time, God was working on me. And then in that altar call, Tony Scott got up and delivered a message, and then Connie, the young lady sitting next to me, grabbed my hand and pulled me forward, and I went up front and accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. So for me, it happened at an altar call in an auditorium with 4,000 people. My life changed at that point. My wife saw all of the bad attributes that she'd been working for years. I do have a question for the ladies in the auditorium, though, the sanctuary, though. Why is it that you marry a man and then you set about changing the man you married? What's up with that? You know, the reality is I figured out why. It's because the women in our lives always know and believe more in us than we do. It's called love. And they believe we can be better than we are. So gentlemen, if you wonder why your wife is always trying to make you better, it's because they're just never satisfied. They want you to be better than you are. In effect, they are God's agent in your life. So, how about you? When did awareness of the need for Jesus Christ come to you? A couple of scriptures helped me. What I realized looking back was getting saved or choosing Jesus is easy. It's just a choice. You just say, I'm ready. And he comes in. That's not the issue. The issue is, how do we get over being selfish, arrogant, prideful, and self-controlling to get ready to say yes? Some of you know people right now that you believe, and I think correctly, need Jesus in their life. And you've been praying for them. And every once in a while, they'll even let you talk about him, and then they shut you down. They're where I was for 11 years as an adult. They may not even be in the awareness stage yet. But they're definitely not in the acceptance stage, because they're not ready to accept. Keep praying for them, and keep sharing Jesus with them. You don't know what God's timetable is for their life. Mine was 11 years long, from leaving high school to 1992. What if people had stopped praying for me? I shudder to think where I would be. There were two scriptures that really helped me understand this. First one's one most of us know. It's John 3:16. It says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever should believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life." Did I understand that the first time I read it? Nope. But I kind of like that last line. Everlasting life. That sounded pretty good. I understood what that meant. But it was enough to get me to continue to look and listen and learn and read. Because that's really what I started to do, was to read the scriptures. And then the second verse that came along that was really helpful for me was Romans 10, verses 9 and 10. And it goes like this. "Because if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For with the heart one believes and is justified, and with the mouth one confesses and is saved." And eventually those verses made sense to me. But what I realized after I said yes to Jesus, now watch this, because if you're in the sanctuary this morning and Jesus is not yet in your heart, you're not going to like what I'm about to say. But I'm going to speak some truth to you. Just because you accept Jesus does not mean life gets automatically easy. Just because you say yes to Jesus, all your problems do not go away. Just because you say yes to Jesus does not mean that life is now a golden ride down the golden sidewalk to a golden eternity. And if any preacher anywhere ever says that, call them out. Because all they are doing is setting those poor people that respond up for failure. But here's the difference. When you say yes to Jesus, whatever you go through, He will be there with you, lockstep, walking along the journey. And that changes everything. But here's what I realized after a little time of being a Christian. It isn't just about saying yes to Jesus. That is our life after saying yes, what it is really all about is how we respond and act differently as a consequence of saying yes. How are you and I to live our lives differently after than we did before? How many know somebody, might even have been you, that when they said yes to Jesus, like everything in their life changed? How many know someone like that? I was one of those people. Everything in my life changed. Now, I'd already got rid of some of the stupid bad habits and not caring what other people thought, because God was prepping me. I already gotten rid of the alcohol, because God was prepping me. See, He was working on me, pay attention to this, He was working on me before I said yes to Him. You understand what that means? That means that all those people that you're praying for, because you're praying for them, God is already working on them. The theological term for that is called prevenient grace, or the grace that comes before someone says yes to Jesus. And it's your prayers and the will of God that feeds that. There were people praying for me I didn't even know. I had attended a gospel singing quartet for my 84-year-old neighbor, Betty Grulich, before I was saved. Didn't even want to go. But I went because it was my 84-year-old neighbor, and unbeknownst to me, every single member of that church from that day forward started to pray for me. Every single Sunday by name for 9 months. There were people praying for me. So if you've got somebody in your mind on a list, on a notepad, a neighbor, a brother, a sister, a cousin, a coworker that you're praying for, keep it up. Keep it up. But here's the challenge for every one of us that have said yes. Because here is what you must do to be saved. Step number 1 is you must acknowledge your sins before God. Boy, that stops most people right there. Had a good buddy of mine named Mike. He was in seminary. And he said, I have never sinned. Not realizing, of course, that he just did. See, his awareness just wasn't there. Right? He figured out by the end of seminary it's why he quit. Because in his world, the fact that he'd sinned made him unworthy to be a pastor. Let me tell you something, and I'm not going to shock anybody here. Pastors sin too. Y'all okay with that? I'm not okay with it, but you know what I'm saying, right? It's going to happen, right? We're going to snap at somebody. I told Jackie on day 1, there's going to come a day I'm going to tick you off. I don't know when it is, and I ain't going to do it on purpose, but there's going to come a day. Because I wanted her to know I'm a human being. I'm not perfect. I'm going to try really hard, but I'm going to make mistakes, and I'm going to tick some people off. Had a lady in my last church. I walked by her one morning and I was late running for church. Got hung up in traffic, didn't leave the house when I was supposed to, and I'm late. You ever been rushed? And I'm like coming in the back door, right past her. I didn't know. She said, "Hi, Pastor Mike." I didn't even hear it. Didn't notice her, didn't see her. Why? I was like, "I'm late." Got the blinders on, running to the back to the pastor's office. She didn't talk to me for 3 months. Now, which one of us had a problem there? Me. Because she was mad at me. That's a problem for me. Now, she may have been one with the action who had the problem, but I had the action and the consequence of the problem. I was there. We can start whenever I'm there. Calm down, Mikey. Right? You ever had someone mad at you, you don't even know why? Forgive them. That's the first step. So how about you? Second, once you acknowledge your sin before God, have you done that? That's the first question. Second step, believe Jesus died for you. This is going to sound funny. He didn't die for just me. And he did die for me, but he didn't die for just me. He died for you. By the way, whether you wanted him to or not, he was willing to do it. Whether he understood the need for it or not, he was willing to do it. Because he loves you. Step number 3, ask Jesus into your heart and confess that belief with your mouth. And you're saved. That's all it takes. It's a simple, one-time decision. The real challenge, though, comes in at that stage. When you say yes to that, here's what happens. What began your awareness of the need for Christ? This is the thinking part. For you personally, what began that awareness? When did you gain acceptance? When did you say yes to Jesus? When did you say, yes, I need Jesus? Were you young? Were you old? When did it happen for you? I actually want to know everybody's story. Because I love hearing that this is how I came to Jesus' story. Now, I'm about to freak some of you out. I've been thinking about this for a week. But starting next week, and I haven't even told them about it yet, I'm nervous because I'm going to freak some people out. Ooh, I'm about to make some people upset. You're going to hear from your deacons. And they're going to share with you their testimony. And then when we're done with all 47 of them, I know there's only like 14 or 15, then we're going to open it up. I want to put in place every week someone gets up and shares their testimony. How awesome would that be to get to know the personal testimony of the people you worship with? Now, I ain't never, ever going to force anybody to do it. So those of you who are like now quaking in your boots, it's okay. We're not going to force you to. But wouldn't that be awesome? To every week hear how somebody came to Jesus? I think that'd be awesome. So we'll see which one of the deacons is bold enough next week. Maybe we'll have to draw straws. They're a pretty bold group. Next, if you would, when you accept Christ, what you do is you move from selfishness to salvation. But once you say yes, watch what happens. Once you accept Christ as your Savior, you move from salvation to sacrifice. You probably can't read that, but what it says is, my life is not my own. And see, that's what stops a lot of people from accepting Jesus. It's because they think they lose their life. The reality is you gain a whole new one. So I want to set up next week by going over Romans chapter 12. Grab your Bible so you can read this one. I don't know what page it's on. Somebody shout it out when you get there. Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. What page? 803. That'll make it easy to find if you're using a Pew Bible. But it says this: "Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship." You offering your body as a living sacrifice is worship to God. So how do we do that? Verse 12, verse 2. "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, His good, pleasing, and perfect will." The Christian experience for many people in our world today stops when they say yes to Jesus. See, evangelistic campaigns are awesome because they bring people through the awareness, through the acceptance, and through the action stage of saying yes for Jesus. But if they stop there, they've almost done a disservice because the person really doesn't understand what they've done. They really don't. They may feel different and they may be different, but they don't understand it. It takes that period of time in the learning and the study and the growth and the knowledge of the Scriptures to understand what God wants of us after we say yes. So next week we're going to concentrate on those two verses. So let's finish today this way. This is what we call the invitation part of the service. So I've asked a couple of deacons to come down front, and this is something new that we're going to be doing as well. Is every time that we do an invitation, we're going to have a deacon or two down front. Now here's the great myth with invitations. The great myth is that if I've already been saved, there's no reason for me to come down front. I'd like to meet the person that has a problem-free life. I'm not one of them. If you have problems in your life, you need Jesus. But I want to make this a two-part invitation. Because I don't know you very well yet. It's literally day 6. Some of you may be in there this morning and you've never made a personal commitment to Jesus Christ. So these first 3 questions are for you. First question: if you are not saved, what else do you need to learn about Jesus? If you're not saved, you don't have any idea what He's done for you, how much He loved you, how much He gave Himself for you, how He was tortured with a whip with chunks of metal in it for you, how He endured humiliation and scorn and outright lies, but He did it because He loves you. What else do you need to learn? Second step: if you're not saved, what emotions inside yourself are blocking you from accepting Jesus Christ? my period of acceptance went on for months. It was all about pride and self-control. It was all about, I can't give up my life to this guy Jesus, because then I won't be in control of my life. With what was going on in my life, I wasn't in control anyway. But that illusion. What's stopping you? And the third question, if you're not saved, are you ready to surrender your heart and your life to Jesus Christ today? Now, if you're in here this morning and you don't know Jesus, listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you. Nobody in this sanctuary is going to make you get out of your seat. We're not going to make you come down front. It's not the way we roll. You can have a conversation with Jesus and accept Him into your heart like my wife did in the privacy of her bedroom when I wasn't even home. See, my example made a difference to her. And then her own inquiry into Scripture and her own question and answers with me as I was studying Scripture helped her go through those 3 questions herself. And she accepted Christ all by herself, all by her lonesome. We'd like to know if you do that as a consequence of our worship service so we can celebrate with you. But you don't have to come down front. In fact, I suspect that most of us, because we're Baptists, maybe been Baptists for a long time, spoke to a wonderful gentleman this morning, been coming to this church for 60-something years. I suspect that somewhere along the line he probably accepted Jesus as his Savior. I would think. I don't know well enough yet. Hopefully I will, and I'll hear his personal testimony story. So for most of us, we've probably already made that decision to accept Jesus into our life. So these 3 questions are for you. Question number 1. If you are saved, what area of your life are you still holding back from God? Is it your pocketbook? Is it your job? Is it that fear of being real? What part of your life that even though you go to church, even though you contribute regularly to the ministries of the church, whether that's financially or with your time, even though you love God, what part of your life are you holding back because you're afraid? I've found in my life there's always something. I want you to take out that mirror and look at yourself and say, God, talk to me as I look at myself and help me dedicate my life to you. All of it. I know this great Christian guy, and he got a lot of money in the bank. God has blessed him financially. And he said, I decided a long time ago I was going to give my life to God, but not my money. Is that his choice? Absolutely, it's his choice. It's his money. He can do with it what he wants. What he doesn't understand is that if he gives all of his life to God, God will bless him more than he can imagine. But that's his choice. Do you come to church, but you don't ever support anything else that's going on at the church? That's probably some of us. Because that's life, isn't it? It's hard to make the commitment to step up. We have a Caritas event coming up in a couple of weeks where we need some folks to come and hang out overnight. How many here sleep every night? Why not pick one and sleep here? You're going to be sleeping anyway. Right? What part of your life are you holding back? Second question. If you are saved, what part of your life are you still resisting and refusing to sacrifice? Sounds like the same question. It's not. Here's the difference. You know you need to give it up. Now you just don't want to. Third question. What actions are you willing to take today to make tomorrow different from today? What actions are you willing to commit to make God's role in your life tomorrow better than God's role in your life today? Now, I don't know if anyone's going to respond to those questions. I have no idea. My hope moving forward in our ministry together is this. My hope is that we don't do an invitation every week and no one comes forward. Because if that's the case, why are we doing an invitation? Somebody in this congregation has to step up and come pray with a deacon or come take a kneeler while we sing our last song. I don't know who it's going to be. I'm willing to resort to bribery. Because here's what I found. When one person steps out and says, I'm going to be that person, somebody else just said, man, I don't have to be first. I'm so glad I can go now. But I'm not going to force anybody. This part of the service is here so you can connect to God. You can pray by yourself. You don't have to talk to one of us. But I don't know about you, I love it when people share their prayers. It touches me when people share their prayers with me. I am changed when someone says, would you walk on my journey with God with me? So as we sing, I'm going to stand up here. Tom and Dave are going to stand up here. Next week it'll be other deacons. Maybe. But we hope that one of you. So let us sing our last song this morning. I don't have a pamphlet. I have no idea what it is. So.